Hi guys, today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Sean Quek, Portfolio Manager at Paragon Capital Management. I've known Sean for many years. He started his career as an auditor before joining Credit Suisse on the investment banking side, where he was the head of research, before we moved him to Bankers Singapore in the head of research and the head of Alpha. He's had a tremendous career and he shares his journey to the entrepreneurial side of the business. It's a real pleasure and I hope you enjoyed the chat as much as we did. Cheers. Sean, how are you?
Very good. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me here today.
Well, listen, we've known each other for a long time. I'm grateful and glad that you're here. For those that don't know you, can you be kind enough just to introduce yourself and give a quick overview before we take a look back in time?
Sure. I'm Sean Quek. I'm a portfolio manager now at Paragon Capital Management Singapore. So I run a global equity fund. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. I joined the company about 3.5 years ago. Launched the fund after 6 months, and I've been running the fund for 3 years now.
Brilliant. Congratulations. It's not. I want to talk about your journey because it's been an interesting one. So part of the podcast is really to look at people's career right from the very beginning. So if you don't mind walking us through it. So initially you studied at Nanyang,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And I want to come back to that later because you ended up teaching there, right, and helping.
Yes.
But talk us through what you decided to study at school and how did you get into investment banking to begin with?
Sure. So yeah, I went to Nanyang. I did accountancy. During those days, NTU was the only university that actually offered accountancy.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, in my earlier years in school, I always felt that I'm a numbers person. So when I was trying to look for a course to study, I felt like accountancy is something that I should be able to do well. So I did that for 3 years, and after graduation, or during the time where you're preparing to graduate and decide what to do, I actually didn't know what really I wanted to do. So I did what most of my peers, I would say, 2/3 of my peers, half to 2/3 of my peers end up doing after graduation, which is audit. So I went to auditing. I was in KPMG, but it was interesting because at KPMG, what I did was I actually went to obviously visit companies as part of the audit process. And interestingly, from that process, I understand myself better, that actually I enjoy looking at businesses, appreciating how they make business, how they do well.
Did you specialize in a particular sector?
Well, that's the other thing as well. Actually, I didn't, which is, to me, is great because then I get exposed to different sectors.
100%.
Right? Yes. And from there, I realized that it's not because of a certain sector that I'm interested in, but rather I'm just interested in businesses. Okay. Right? So I went to see advertising companies, manufacturing companies, trading companies, and even oil and gas companies.
Yeah.
So it was a sort of a big eye-opener for me. And like I said, really exciting each time I go into a new company and trying to figure out, what exactly do they do and how do they make money, and different processes and, so on and so forth.
Did you have to travel?
Yes. So as part of the audit process, we actually we went to Indonesia.
Okay.
So because, like oil and gas, so there was a company there. We actually stayed in the facility as well. Okay. So it was interesting. But from there, after my first year, for the second year, for audit, you go back to the same companies that you're doing the auditing. Obviously, different level of work, but pretty much the same companies. Then I realized that the learning curve is not so interesting anymore.
Slow down a bit.
Yes, because you go into the same company the second time, you're not learning as much, right? Because you have seen a lot of things the first time around. So that was actually when I realized that, I'm not into auditing or accounting, but I want to be exposed to businesses.
Okay.
So at that time, I actually decided that there are 2 areas that I want to go into. One is business consulting, which obviously will allow me to see many, many companies. The other one is equity research. Okay. Which is where I ended up.
Where you ended up.
But of course, after many tries and, it wasn't sort of like a walk in the park, right, in terms of getting a role, but it worked out. Yeah.
What I find curious is guys like that are our age and older probably had less influence from our parents than this generation. Because we were perhaps less well informed. But who did you seek guidance from, like when you were about to enter banking? Did you speak to, because obviously you had friends that were going off to do different things, but I'm just curious.
Yes. Interesting that you mentioned that actually. Actually, part of the reason why I chose accounting was it was in discussion with my mother, my mom, that she always felt that it was an interesting role that I can eventually become a sole proprietor, right? I can set up my own business. So she actually encouraged me as well when I decided to do accountancy.
Really?
Yes. So actually, she was a little bit, just on that part, she was a little bit disappointed that when I decided to leave KPMG to do equity research.
Yeah.
But on your question in terms of how yes, definitely the exposure. I think during those days, even in school, we don't have so much exposure to Wall Street.
Yeah.
And so it's really through schoolmates that I start to appreciate the role that I ended up doing.
Because the reason why, because I've got 3 kids now, and they're like, my son's just turned 18, so he does national service this year. But I realize, and I look at my own journey, there was no counsel. Yes. And like I remember filling in a form in terms of the supposed career counselor, and her suggestion was, I'm not going to lie, was that I either become a landscape gardener or work on dustbins. Because I said, one of the questions was, do you like being outdoors?
Yep.
And I said, yes.
Okay.
And there was no guidance whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you left KPMG. What was next?
Yeah. So I joined a local stockbroker. I was there for about a year to 2 years. And then the investment bank equity research role came out. So I applied for it and got into Credit Suisse, basically.
And then you would stay there for many, many years,
yes,
right?
Yes. So I started off as a research assistant.
Okay.
Spent 11 years there. By the time I left, I was head of research in Singapore.
That's a full journey. I mean,
yes,
and all on the IB side, right?
Yes, all on the IB side. At the same time, actually, I was given the opportunity to work in Hong Kong as well.
Okay.
With the same company, with pretty much the same colleagues, just, regionally.
Did you do that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I can remember that.
Yeah.
Walk us through, what does a research assistant do?
Yeah. Well, those days, things are very different. First thing in the morning, you come in, you pick up the newspapers.
Yeah.
And then you start going through the news articles.
Yeah.
And then you use the scissors, literally cut and paste.
Yeah.
Onto a A4 sheet of paper. And then you start photocopying the news, and then prepare them for the team's morning meeting, so that they can review what's going on overnight.
Yeah.
So that's literally cutting and pasting.
Was it always in the same Credit Suisse office?
No. Actually, we moved quite a few times actually. When I first started, we were in UOB Plaza, UOB Plaza 1.
That's where I started my career back in 01.
Wow.
I realized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean that was a premier.
It was
office building.
Yeah.
Right. So Credit Suisse was there. Then when Credit Suisse bought BZW, a name that I think not many people,
I'm not familiar with it,
but will know today. Because of the broking business, this was actually during the Asian financial crisis.
Yeah.
We moved to Singland Tower just across the road.
Yes.
Because they have an office there. Then subsequently, when Credit Suisse consolidated all the office space at One Raffles Link, I think that was 2002, if I remember correctly. We all moved over to One Raffles Link.
Stay there. I came to Singapore for the first time when I was 11. My mum was born here, but she moved to the UK when she was a teenager. And I've got pictures from the Marina Mandarin where we were privileged enough to stay, overlooking that entire area. And then you forget how much is reclaimed land.
Yes.
And if you go back then, there was nothing there, right? When you looked out.
Yes.
Bananas. Okay, so then fast forward, then just unfold. How do you go from being a research assistant to the head of research? Because that's a real journey.
Yes. Wow, that's a lot to cover. So I think the good thing is that through being a research assistant, you get exposed to different analysts and their style. So you get to learn, different analysts, they like to do things differently. And over time, I was able to adapt and mold myself to a certain style that I become eventually, right? So yeah, it was a long journey. Those days, a lot was happening in Asia. Those were the days where China wasn't really the most important market for the region. So ASEAN, there was a lot of focus on ASEAN. Singapore was a big market.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of work. I learned a lot covering stocks in ASEAN and Singapore. Then, of course, until SARS hit.
SARS was devastating.
Yes. So it sort of hollowed out the affected markets somewhat. That was when I put up my hand to my boss then. He actually moved from being the Singapore head of research to become the regional head of research. And I asked him to consider me for opportunities in overseas markets, particularly covering China or the North Asian markets. So I went to Hong Kong. I moved my whole family to Hong Kong.
How old were you at the time? Roughly.
I was that was in 2005. So I was about 35 years old.
I want to, if you don't mind me, I want to unpack that a little bit because a lot of people ask me how to handle their appraisals, how do they get promotions, and I think obviously you need to know your boss, you need to know the management structure. But I think sometimes there's a fine balance in being, assertive and wanting to do more in your career or being too aggressive. But I find a lot of people overlook this one simple thing, putting your hand up.
Yes.
But tell us what that looked like when you did it. So before you did it, did you speak to the missus, say, look, this is what I'm thinking?
Yes. So it's a combination. I think it sort of developed along the way. So first is because you start to see colleagues doing it. So they are presidents. So you realize that, okay, that's interesting, right? Then you start thinking how that can be relevant to yourself. Then of course, on the family side, you look at the situation, speak to the wife, and but it's an ongoing discussion, right? It's not like tomorrow we're going. What do you think, right? But so it sort of built over time.
And how long were you in Hong Kong for?
I was there for 2 years.
Did you love it?
Yeah, I mean, from in terms of work experience, I mean, it's just tremendous, right? Because what I did was I was based in Hong Kong, but actually I was covering a lot of Chinese companies. This was a time where the Chinese IPO market was booming. So I was actually doing Chinese IPOs, in companies listing in New York, listing on NASDAQ. So it was exciting stuff, and again, you travel to cities that you've never been before, and that's where you start doing the due diligence and all that. So it was a lot of learning. One of the biggest challenge at that time was, when you go to China, they only for meetings they only speak in Mandarin, right? So so that was a learning curve, which of course, that was good as well. So yeah, it was a good 2 years. But what happened subsequent to that was CS, they have an opening for, going back to your point about opening for a head of research role. So I was asked if I'm interested, and to me I thought, okay, perhaps time to come back. While working in Hong Kong is great for career, work-wise, but in terms of the family, I felt that it's better. The kids are getting a bit older now, so I thought, okay, it's time to come back, so that they can settle back into the.
How old are your kids now? What are they doing now?
My kids, my eldest is 28 now. So
really? Okay.
Yeah, so she's working for a few years now. So. In fact, even my number 2 has started working.
So they're no longer, the ATM is not that anymore, right?
Pretty much. Yes. I think to a large extent, they're sensible. So
are they still in Singapore?
Yes, they're here.
But that's the other thing I was going to say about moving abroad. It's something that a lot of people may be reluctant to do, especially when you're married and you have kids and they're young. But I just think, rarely will you ever regret it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
So you got the nod, and then you came back as the head of research.
Yes.
So these were 2 turning points in your career, really.
Yeah. We are pretty much, I think, especially in terms of the equity research sell side IB role, that was the sort of, the highlight of my career. Those were highlights, going to Hong Kong, spending 2 years there, being exposed to China, because before that it was all, Southeast Asia. The second part obviously is starting to run a team, right? Which it gives me a totally different skill set. Once you move out of the team and become one level up, right? A lot of things change,
Yes.
right? So you learn that and learn to manage it. And of course, most importantly, learning to build a team, right? So, and as you know, there are always changes. People leave, and then, you do need to hire as well. So that's also an important skill set that I managed to pick up.
Well, they say hiring's tiring. It's not easy, right?
Yes.
And so how did you break it down? Was it by asset class? You had an equity research team, a fixed income research team?
Yeah. So for IBs, typically we're siloed by asset class.
Okay.
So usually the equity research will run regionally and reporting typically to New York. In our case, locally we report to Hong Kong. So it's a functional kind of a reporting line. So we actually don't know our fixed income colleagues very well.
Really?
Yes.
Like a Chinese war between you, is it?
Pretty much, yes.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Because the thing is that when we talk to our clients are siloed as well, right? So the equity guys speak to the equity portfolio managers or equity analysts on the buy side, for example, and the fixed income analysts on the sell side, they speak to the fixed income PMs and analysts on the buy side. So there's, on the day-to-day basis, there's really not much interaction. So for in terms of the team, we typically break down by sectors. So the analysts, we have analysts that are either banking analysts, they cover the banks, or industrial analysts, they cover the industrial companies, and so on and so forth.
So I met you and then started talking to you about the possibility of moving to private banking.
Yes.
Obviously, you knew about private banking because of Credit Suisse's, strong affiliation with it.
Yes.
But I'm just curious, was it something that you had seriously thought about or contemplated at that stage, or not at all?
Actually, not at all. Those days, the typical career move is to go to the buy side.
Yes.
Right? Either be an analyst or be a PM.
Yes.
Typically, you start as a buy side analyst, you work your way up, and you prove yourself, and you become a PM. So in my case, it was a bit of a I would say sort of blindsided when you came along. But for me, I think it was interesting because to me, after being head of research for 4 years in Singapore, I see myself at the sort of the ceiling of my role in terms of where I can advance to. The other option, obviously, is to again take a more regional role. But I've done that. I've been to Hong Kong. I've sort of get my exposure that I felt I wanted and needed.
Yeah.
So that was sort of done, and so really, for me, was really to move out to something different. And clearly, wealth management is an interesting option. The thing is that actually during those days, it's not a common thing for
It was very unusual.
Yes, so-called Insti guys to move to wealth management, which seemed to be a bit more sort of retail kind of setup. Right? Yes.
And also, what I realized is most of the private banks back then didn't want to consider it because they felt IB guys were completely different kettle of fish, which you were, and it may not work out. I always felt there was a level of sophistication on the IB side that was pretty significant.
Yeah.
And I think there were a few pioneer guys like you that made the switch.
Yes.
What was that transition like, though? Because I liken it, the difference between rugby and football. It's completely different game.
Yeah. It looks the same, but it's different.
Yeah.
When you go into the details. So it's interesting for me because I think during that time, because when my peers hear about it, they're like, they're surprised that I'm making the move.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think for the more sort of institutional guys going into wealth management, I think what we bring is a different level of focus in terms of what we look at, the kind of work that we do. But on the other hand, what I felt that was that, yes, I can bring something to the table, but more importantly, I felt that for me, I have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And proven correctly, hindsight is that, I felt that I could learn about other asset classes.
Yes.
When you're in, like I said, when you're in an IB meeting, you only talk about stocks.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, you don't even focus a lot on the macro, because the clients are very much focused on the company level, the sector level, stuff that they look at.
Yeah.
So that is where we focus on.
Yes.
But in wealth management, the key difference is that when you go into a meeting with a client, the client can be talking about a Magnificent Seven stock,
Yes.
a Russian bond during those days, or let's say a Chinese bond, or the gold, right? So from in one meeting, you can actually talk multi-asset, right? So the good thing for me was I was there with my colleagues. I do my equity discussion, and they would come in with their views on bonds, on commodities, on FX.
Yeah.
This is where I start to get good exposure.
Very quickly.
Yes. And the other thing about even within the equity asset class is that when you're in Asia, you do only Asia stocks, right? Whereas in wealth management, you're exposed to global equities.
Correct.
Same thing, a client will be investing in TSMC and will be investing in NVIDIA. So you need to be exposed to everything.
Big time.
So again, with the good thing is that with the right skill set from my IB days, I was able to expand that and pick up on global equities.
My memory of that search was the bank was looking for a highly cerebral individual. What my take was always, if you have accomplished a high degree black belt in one particular area or asset class, and especially equities in particular, because it's very complex and sophisticated, that you can transition that to the other areas, no problem.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, and then in terms of your journey at BOS, you also ended up heading the Alpha team.
Yes.
So just explain to the uninitiated, what is that?
Yes. So basically Alpha team is almost like having a hedge fund within the setup. So the idea is for us to go around multi-asset, looking for multi-asset opportunities across asset class, across region, to look for alpha opportunities. This was actually, to me, a very insightful idea that my then manager came up with. So he came from the buy side. He was a PM for a long time, came over and become our CIO. I was reporting to him. After a short while, after a few months of looking at the business, he felt that a lot of the focus for wealth management was more about not getting things, looking out for things that will go wrong, rather than, looking for the big gainers, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So because the way that our products are structured, if you buy stocks that don't go wrong, don't explode, right, then you're fine. And even more so for bonds, right? It's about collecting your coupons and making sure that, the company doesn't go into trouble, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you are in a hedge fund or in a buy side, is a lot more about finding the idea that can give you a lot of returns. So the team was set up that way. So the idea was that we separate ourselves from the rest of the team doing research, and the Alpha team basically is out there looking around for ideas that will be beneficial for not just the PMs. So we work with the PMs internally, but also for the clients, as well as the rest of the bank.
One of the things I was curious about, when I speak to a lot of people that reach a senior level, which you were as a head of research, it's almost like there's a limit in how far your career can go. It's like, if I go in this direction, where do I hit a cul-de-sac, or in this direction? When that opportunity, arrived, did you think, okay, this is giving me some different exposure?
Yes. I think very much so, because for me, I think for research, after a while, you realize that some of the work that you do is pretty repetitive.
Yeah.
So it gets a bit boring.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're actively just looking at ideas with no constraint, right, then it becomes a lot more exciting.
Yeah.
So really, that period, it was relatively short period of my career.
Yeah.
Was actually very exciting.
Really?
Because you wake up every day and you try and see, where can I make money?
Yeah.
It's as, the objective is as simple as that. Right?
Is your challenge therefore now becoming focused and not, looking everywhere?
Yes. Well, you are, in a way, you're looking everywhere, but you're focused on ideas that you think can make money.
Yes.
Right? Rather than focusing on, I have this 50 stocks that I need to make sure things are going okay.
Yeah.
Right? So you drop the baggage, so to speak, and then you have a free rein, you're running around looking for ideas.
Yeah.
Which I mean is actually quite liberating.
Yes.
And like I said, it was exciting. So that was actually, I would say, looking back, the most the most fun part of my time at BOS.
So shout out to your old boss that created that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, his background was fixed income.
Yes.
Right. So kind of complemented yours on the equity side.
Yes. Yes.
Talk about investment conviction. When you're going into anything with high conviction, do you feel that a lot of people in your function before have struggled with that?
Yeah. I think, again, going back to managing people, what I actually learned a lot about investing when I was managing analysts, because you got to see how different. Because when we do our work, we come up with our own analysis. You're just looking at yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you're not sure what exactly is your strength or your weaknesses. But when you start to see other people's work, when they submit their reports to me for vetting, or they come to me and bounce ideas, then you start to understand that, people do look at it differently, right? And the more people you're exposed to, the more the different styles or different behavior that you actually start to be exposed to learn about.
Yeah.
Which, frankly, as an investor, it is amazing. So being a manager actually helped the investing itself, right?
Okay.
Yeah, of course, being a manager, you learn the ropes of being a manager. I mean, that's a totally different skill set and area to explore.
We'll talk about what were the key qualities of the team when you pulled together a high-performing team that you were looking for, and how did you make sure the team was complementary?
Yep. So I think in my case, I was lucky to get teams which tend to be a bit more mixed in terms of the experience. So especially towards the end of my career, I realized that, okay, you need to manage differently. So for example, if it's a relatively junior analyst, you tend to spend a lot more time hand-holding, challenging them. But when it comes to more senior analysts, you appreciate, what they are bringing to the table. So you sort of take a step back and let them run a bit more freely.
Yeah.
And they tend to enjoy that. So it's not about, applying, being having the same style across the team. Really, you need to tailor it to different individuals.
Yeah.
And see where their strengths and where their weaknesses. And of course, there are certain sort of categories that you sort of try to place them into, and then you apply differently in terms of your management style.
How did, just to reverse engineer it, because one of the things I always say to people, I don't know if I told you this, but like you were at Bank of Singapore for almost a decade. Most of the people we place stay in their company for many, many years.
Yep.
And I always think, look, it helps tremendously if you have a godfather or a godmother, which is not always possible, and multiple champions.
Yep.
How did you deal with stakeholder management? Because I think that's something that is often overlooked when someone is rising the career ranks.
Yeah. I think that part a lot has to do with communication, so that they understand where you're coming from. I mean, I think especially when you serve different functions, right? We have our own KPIs, we have our own objective from a business perspective. So I think it's important to let them understand, where is your focus, and then of course, more equally important is to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Then once you appreciate the motivation behind certain actions or certain behavior, I think it's easier to appreciate the person and what the person is trying to do. Then of course, again, we serve different functions, right? So for research, end of the day, we're doing due diligence.
Yes.
We're really checking to see, which idea will work, which idea we think won't work, right?
Yeah.
So that's the focus. But again, allowing the other party to appreciate that, this is what we're doing, and will help. Yeah.
The other interesting thing is, you probably won't remember this, but I moved to the US for a few years where I was doing a lot of hedge fund work, and my wife was doing a PhD at Yale. And I came back, and one of my guys who I'd assigned to help manage the Bank of Singapore account and work with you, for example, he'd been in discussions with you, and I said, "Oh, did you catch up with Sean for a coffee?" And he said, No, I spoke to him on the phone. I said, why do you mean for a coffee? Because I always think when you get the time, it's also, people choose to work with you not just because you deliver, but your friendships evolve and you sit down. And I actually think inviting someone for a cup of coffee or a lunch, it's overlooked.
Yes.
Don't you find?
Yes. So for me, in fact, now, given, my role, so what I do actually, I catch up with, a lot of the people that I work with, whether they're my colleagues or they're my clients. Those relationship is invaluable to start with. And at the same time, from a investing perspective, from a business perspective, they give me an idea of what's going on, in the marketplace, business trends. It's always nice to sit down with someone, have a coffee, and without agenda. That's the
thing.
That's the key, right?
Yeah. Because if someone's always thinking you're needing something or wanting something, it doesn't work.
Yeah, sometimes it happens. I think I do have I've cases I've experienced where I call someone up and then we sit down. And then you could feel that person is like waiting to see what's the what I'm going to ask for, but you do feel it.
It does happen.
Yeah, it does happen.
When you think about the balancing aspect of someone in a senior leadership role from a technical perspective and a leadership perspective, I find between the two that the management side, the leadership side, the stakeholder management side is more important typically than the technical, because a lot of people that are great technically can't necessarily convey that message, get it to the market, manage people. But if you're a great manager, you can always appoint the technical skills.
Yes.
Do you agree?
Yes. Yes. But at the same time, my personal experience is that I've seen guys that are very good with their technicals. After they rise up, they are able to switch over into a very leadership.
Yes. So you think that fundamental, that foundation is imperative?
Well, I wouldn't say that the guy is able or a person is able to become a leader because he's technically sound.
No.
It's not a one-for-one. But I guess what I'm saying is that a guy who is technically strong, but sometimes they're also able to switch on and become a leader as well. So it's not a prerequisite, but on the other hand, it's not a handicap as well.
True.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about how Nanyang and you guys started to decide to collaborate. How did that journey come about?
Sure. It was actually very interesting because I actually went back to the university because my daughter was attending the open house.
Oh.
Yes. Then I went back and I realized that what they do have a lot of the presenters. A lot of them have been there for a long time. They're academics. So I realized that maybe having practical examples, people sharing what's going on out there in the marketplace would be helpful to the students.
Yeah.
Frankly, how I felt in my learning journey is that when I was in school, a lot of the concepts that I read from books, they were just concepts, right? I really learned, for example, when I do audit, I have so many of those aha moments where this was what the book was talking about, so because you never actually do it, it was just an idea, but you don't fully appreciate why you're doing it.
It's not tangible, right?
Yes. So maybe it's the way I learned, right? So I felt that having someone to share is important. And during my uni days, again, I enjoy the adjunct professors' classes the most because they have real life examples to share. So I felt that that would help. So what I did was I spoke to a schoolmate who was actually on the board of NTU and suggested to him that this could be something that I would like to do.
Yeah.
Then he connected me with a professor, and then I started doing this sharing session.
Did you find it rewarding?
Yes. I think when you start to see how the students fully start to better, maybe not fully, but better appreciate what they're studying.
Yeah.
Then or how they can use what they are studying, I think you get the sense of satisfaction. Yeah, for sure.
What do you think is the most important type of advice you can give to young aspiring investors?
Yeah, I think this is it. I think being exposed to the real world, rather than just looking at the theories. Because I mean, for example, a lot of the students I interact with, they'll bring the DCF model, and like this is like the holy grail, right? They think that they will find the absolute answer to a stock.
Yes.
By using a DCF, for example. But then they realize that in real life, it's just so much more than that. So I think so my suggestion would be exposed to different things.
Yeah.
Internship is one,
Yes.
but not the only thing. So these days there are, I mean, again, through my exposure with the schools, I noticed that there are a lot of investment clubs as well. So these are clubs where they bring some people with the same mindset.
Yeah.
Some guys might be interested in stock research. Some guy might be interested in asset allocation, portfolio management. They come together, and then they learn together. They share ideas.
Those clubs, I think they're overlooked because let's say you're interested in learning how to build a kit aeroplane.
Yep.
You can read about it, but until you start to pull it together, and try and get it into the clouds,
yes.
Talk about some of the critical skills that you think young investors really should think about technically to help them.
Yep. So I think the key, I mean, like for myself, I feel that the key is about understanding the business, right? So when you look at the stock, you need to understand the business. Whereas a lot of, I mean, of course, it's always about stories and all that at the first level when you first getting exposed to a certain stock idea, either through social media these days or during our time, you read a newspaper article and then they highlight to you a stock. So a lot of it is about the story, but I think it's important for people to realize that it is the business that you need to appreciate. And it's important to then understand which are the 2 or 3 key drivers for the business. Right. And then from there, you can start to have a better appreciation of what can drive the share price. So the valuation, rather than, being very price driven, where stock price move because of momentum and people get sucked into that kind of a driver for the share price. Rather than the fundamental, the business of the stock.
Do you think for students that are trying to go into investment, that one of the key challenges is like you start with a small pot of gold, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000.
Yes.
And then because that's their entire net worth.
Yes.
What do you suggest? You say, well, look, take a plunge, put a little bit of money in.
Yes. I think that makes a difference. For 2 reasons. One, like I said, you're actually doing it. You're not just reading about it or you're just building paper models, but you actually never do the actual trading, buying a stock, deciding what level to buy, and then subsequently, if you make money, deciding what level to sell, so on and so forth. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is about the skin in the game. Right? That makes a difference.
Big time.
Yes. And when actually, to me, because a big part of investing is really about the emotions.
Yes.
So then you start to appreciate your own emotions, right?
How you'll react.
Yes. So we, again, through my dealing with whether clients, colleagues, and so on and so forth, you appreciate that people react differently. And so then you start to also learn how you react, right? Of course, for a person who has just started out, you just learn more about yourself, right? But then as you, again, working with others through, let's say, investment clubs, you start to understand, this guy is different from me. Right? He looks at this, but I don't like to look at that. Yeah. So then you start to realize and you start to understand yourself a lot more.
Because I liken pressure, be it sales pressure, revenue pressure, or investment pressure, and you put money on the table, to like a scaffold board. So if it's on the floor, you can walk up and down it blindfold, no problem. But if you put it 1,000 feet in the air, the value proposition becomes very different. And it's the same when you've got money on the table. And as you know, as an entrepreneur, when say when you worked in a big corporate world and you say, look, there are 5 guys in this room, and if you added up how much everyone earned per hour, this meeting has just cost us 20 grand. And then if you owned the business, you'd make sure that you were a lot more efficient in that meeting.
Yes. No, I mean, just to give you an example, right? Currently, in my firm, what we believe in is that for the fund managers, you have to have your own investment in your own fund. So we are all required to have meaningful investment in our own funds.
Proof's in the pudding then, right? As you said, skin in the game, you're investing.
And I think it works in 2 ways, right? One is, yes, you have skin in the game. Then obviously you're not going to make silly decisions. I mean, obviously you're going to have good calls, bad calls, but you don't do silly things. The second advantage is that you're actually managing your own money as well at the same time, right? So it makes life
perfect sense
easier, right? You will not be distracted to do something else. So it makes perfect sense.
How do you personally keep abreast of all the trends and what's happening in the market? How do you manage your day to keep up to date with everything?
So for me right now, I like I said earlier, I spend a lot of my time actually meeting people. So after 30 years, you know people from different doing different things. So the advantage of that is that sitting down having coffee, asking them about what's going on, what they're up to, actually give you some perspective of what, for example, what the private banks are doing, what the fund houses are going through, what the stockbrokers are thinking about, so when you start to piece all those small stories together, it gives you a better idea of what's going on. So that's how I get abreast of. I mean, of course, other than reading Bloomberg and the typical news wires. So for me, it's really meeting real people, doing real work.
And hear what they have to say.
Yes. And, are they going through difficult times? Are they going through good times? I mean, those insights are invaluable.
They are. What about, technology, AI, and how everything is completely been radically changed? What do you think the future holds for people in your position vis-a-vis what AI is going to do to transform it?
I think, to me, AI is another level of innovation. I mean, again, I started my career
with the newspaper
clippings, right? So getting our hands, dirty every morning, literally. So I think the way I see it is innovation is here to, it will keep being here and keep improving things. So it's really about how we use these tools to invest, to improve our investment process, right? So I won't be, on one hand, I'm not too worried about it. And on the other hand, I'm of course embracing certain things that I feel, that can help us in our role. So for example, now with the processing power, right, that you have, right, it's a lot easier to process a lot of data than before. And in the past, one example is that in the past, when I start doing research on a sector, I will go to the library. My favorite my favorite tool is the library printing card. Right. I'll go through books and I'll look for charts, information. I will photocopy them and bring back to help me in my research. These days it's all on the web. Right. So you can just, plow through the web. So the process has improved a lot, make our life easier. I don't have to spend so much time in the library anymore. But at the same time, the investment philosophy to me is pretty much still the same.
What I realize now is I was telling my kids this. So say you buy a property and over 10 years it appreciates a great deal, and wow, you're going to make a lot of profit vis-a-vis when you bought it for. But if you want to go back into the market, unless you're going to downgrade on the size of the property, you're not going to see that upside. And I kind of feel that way about AI because everyone's using it, right? So does it really make you better at your job vis-a-vis your competitors? I'm not so sure. You still have to be ahead of the game, right?
So it's about, I guess, looking for tools that allow you to be ahead of the game. Right. So going back to your property example, perhaps location is important. Right. You find a property that can appreciate 10% when the average is 5%. Something like that. So that you can be ahead of the game. So when it's time to switch from one property to the other, you're in a relatively better position.
Yeah.
So that's I guess one way when we invest, that's how we think as well. And the other thing that, through investing, you learn about such things in daily life is what's neutral and what's overweight.
Yeah.
Having one property is neutral.
Yes.
Because you need a shelter, right?
Yes.
But having two properties, then you're overweight. Should you be overweight or should you be neutral?
Yeah.
Those are decisions that you actually start to make clearer.
Yes.
When you appreciate, the concepts like this. Yeah.
What do you personally do to stay motivated, as a leader, as an investor? Because, I think motivation and discipline are key.
Yes.
But I'm just curious about yourself.
Yes. So for me, I think I'm lucky for this role, this role is suitable for me as an investor, as a asset allocator, or as a fund manager. They are pretty much the same thing. Is that I'm always curious about businesses. That's how I sort of started. And after 30 years, I still feel that when I hear about DeepSeek during Chinese New Year,
Yes.
I actually, for better or for worse, I actually spend a big part of my Chinese New Year period reading about DeepSeek because I'm just wondering, what is this all about, right?
Yeah.
And how is it going to change the AI story? So to me, I think having that helped a lot. But the motivation for me is really about the investing to ensure that I generate the adequate returns for my fund, in turn for my clients, right? So that to me is the priority, and I'm glad that my career has come to a point where my incentives are very much aligned with my clients' interests.
Yeah.
So when I think about what I need to do, there's only one set of interests,
Yes.
which is my client's interest, which
Yes.
again is consistent with my interest. So it makes life a lot easier.
When I've spoken to a lot of people that have moved to your side or to the multifamily office side, they kind of talk a little bit about the conflict of interest. And I think being aligned with the client directly,
Yes.
having skin in the game,
Yes.
co-investing, I think that's really, the salient difference.
Yeah.
When you look at the, investing in the public and private sector, how do you view the two differently?
For me, I'm pretty much more in the public space, in terms of public equities. So that's still my focus. But end of the day, to me, it's about the business, right?
Okay.
Whether it comes in this form or another form,
Yeah.
right? It matters less. Not that it doesn't matter, it matters less. The more important focus really should be the business itself, right? If I'm buying a VC company or buying a privately owned company, meaning you take 100% stake, or if I'm buying 1,000 shares of a big company,
Yeah.
the business aspect is the same, right? I'm buying a share into the business.
Yes.
Of course, again, the technical aspect is different. When you're buying 100% versus when you're buying 0.1%, it's very different. But again, the starting point needs to be the business. So to me, but like I said, because my experience is in the public equity space, so once I understand the business, my experience also give me that edge in terms of the technical aspect, in terms of how do I get that exposure, and then how do I make sure that my portfolio is right size for that particular exposure, for example.
Yeah.
So that's where the public equity experience come in.
Yeah.
But because for me, day to day, I don't look at VC startups. I don't look at so much private companies.
Yes.
But to me,
the foundation is the same.
Yes, the concept is the same.
You by and large, you've always had non-consensus viewpoints, right? Do you feel that you really need to have done your research and therefore be very confident to have those? Because most people will follow the norms, the trends.
Yes.
Yes.
I think there are two parts of it. One is the research work itself. You need to pick up things that people don't see.
Okay.
That's the part that, because if you see what everybody else is seeing, you have the same conclusion.
Correct.
Right? So you need to, if you're seeing something different in terms of the conclusion, your process must allow you to pick up something that's different. That's one. That, frankly, sometimes is the easier part. The difficult part is the emotional part, where you need to walk against, the example I like to give is that you're walking into the MRT station at 8:45 a.m. at Raffles Place, right?
Yes.
It's like you're going, you ask yourself, am I going the right place?
Yeah.
Because everybody else is going the other way, right? So you need to be able to manage that, which I think is the most difficult versus the technical part.
Yeah. I think that really requires a lot of confidence and courage, and not a lot of people have it.
Yes.
That's why it's funny, like two of my heroes have always been my mum, who's passed on now, and my wife, and I listen to them. But when it comes to business, when I ask their advice and they tell me something, invariably I'll always do the opposite, just because they're not business people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
The acumen is different.
Yeah, and I always think a little bit about that. I don't know if you know this, I'm very dyslexic. So I really only started to properly read for my career, my profession, probably when I was in my mid-20s.
Well, okay.
Right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I did it because my wife was doing a master's, and I just thought if she's studying, then I want to study. I'm going to try and improve myself. But I'm just curious, what books, if any, have really stood out to you in the course of your career that you can look back on and say, look, that was a really good book that helped me?
Yeah. I guess there's no one specific book.
Okay.
So for me, the earlier days when I was doing company research, a lot of the concept I learned from, your security analysis kind of book, right? Benjamin Graham, then subsequently Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger.
Yeah.
So those kind of ideas about, focusing on the business, right? I mean, sometimes the way that they presented it is very simple, but it makes a lot of sense, right? Which, more importantly, you overlook, right? Because of all the noise, people start focusing on the stories, the share price.
Yeah.
But it's really about the business. So that is the aspect that I've sort of learned at the early stage of my career, which I felt is very important.
Yeah.
But more recently, the one book which I felt was quite interesting is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel.
Okay, I haven't read that.
Yeah,
I'll check it out.
I thought it's very interesting. Again, I mean, I like books that are simple.
Is it talking about you as an investor, or just generally one's relationship with money?
The latter. So generally how you see money, rather than purely about investing. Of course, there are some areas about investing.
Yeah.
It covers, areas about how you see money, how you see spending money, how you see saving money. So it's actually a book that these days, when I meet a youngster, is a book that I recommend to them.
It's so interesting, say, because you can speak to different people on this. So some people are of the mindset, if you come from nothing and you build it to something, that person always has the confidence that, I came from nothing, I could go again.
Yes.
I'm different. I came from nothing, I built a little something, and I'm probably a lot more cautious now. And what I realize is like, if I look at sports, in order to become a champion, I think a lot of sports people are quite daring. They do different things. They're dynamic.
Yes.
But when you get to the top, it's a little bit different. You start playing the game a little bit differently.
Yes.
So I think there's a Donald Trump saying that I heard years ago that made me laugh. I'm not saying I'm a fan of his, but it's very true. He said, if you owe the bank $1 million, you're in trouble. But if you owe them $100 million, they're in trouble.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one. Too big to fail.
That's interesting. What sort of people, or who do you admire most in the financial world?
Again, I would say, I mean, some of these sort of typical figures that we have.
Some of the titans you mentioned.
Yeah. But for me, actually, interestingly, because you did mention about, for example, talking to your late mom about business.
Yeah.
For me, actually, I feel that a lot of my influence at a very early age was my mom. She used to run a small business.
Okay.
With my dad. But she will actually tell me a little bit about, why she do certain things. And it allows me to get a little bit of insights from a sort of a business mind.
Yeah.
For example, she will tell me that they're stocking up before the budget because they expect the budget to have an impact on the prices.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
But
Economics 101. But
Exactly.
if you granularize it,
Exactly.
yeah, but the principle holds true, whatever business.
Yes. So if you learn two things, you learn it at that small level, which, is related to you in a very practical way.
Yeah.
Because she's actually ordering, I'm sitting there and then she's like ordering, I'm ordering more because, 2 weeks time or next week is the budget, right?
Yeah.
That's very real. And number two, at that age. So you start to get exposed to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another example, which, until today I remember, walking along with her, from our house, right? Then she will say, oh, this businessman has this new big ass Mercedes, right? And it's like, oh, for business people, they need this. It's like a marketing.
Yeah.
So, wow, okay. So you learn little bit, day by day. Every time, there's an opportunity, she will just drop a pointer like that.
But it's funny what kids pick up on, right, in their developmental years.
Yes. And I mean, this must be like, wow, easily 40 years ago, right? And it's just
embedded.
Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
It is interesting because I think now with my kids, my wife and I only ever really disagree or argue about the kids, right? And she's an amazing mum. She's a better mum than I'm a dad. And I think I'm a good dad because I'm of the mindset, look, sometimes she's too soft on them, right? Because I believe in encouragement and nurturing. But I think at some point the kids they've got to learn to drive, on their own, which my wife agrees with.
Yep.
But what I learned growing up was, because my mum and dad were so busy working, my mother taught us how to do everything. So I was washing and cooking from the age of 11 onwards.
Yep.
And if you got it wrong, if you cooked that meal and it didn't taste good, it was coming out of your pocket money. You had to go and buy it and cook it again. And then I would basically, because she would say, you didn't cook that with love, Paul.
Yep.
And I said, well, I don't love cooking. She goes, I can taste it, right? And then I'd have to go to the shop and buy it again. And then I was cooking, smiling, but I was secretly thinking, I'm not enjoying this either. But, but there were a lot of lessons learned, right?
Yeah, if that was me, I would have lost all my pocket money because I really cannot cook.
Yeah, really? Still to this day?
No.
I learned, actually, it was funny because my mum used to teach us so many different, now that I'm looking back at it, but the one thing I learned from my mum is also, so she said, Paul, don't lend anyone money, family or friends. If you're going to help them out, give them the money, right? Because the reality is it will change the nature of the friendship, So like, for example, if she stayed with my aunt, her sister in London, she would always give her money. Or one time she took a loan from her other sister, she paid it back with interest. And she said, make it very, very clear. And then she taught me that, friendship and business is oil and water, right? It just doesn't go. So actually, looking back, there were a lot. I should write those lessons down, actually. What's one habit that you've adopted most that's helped you succeed professionally?
I think not so much in terms of the sort of a practical habit, but more a thinking habit.
Okay.
Is to always think back and see if am I already consensus or am I still contrarian?
Okay.
Right. So because we tend to over time become complacent.
Yeah.
So it is important to keep reminding yourself, right?
Yes.
Really getting above average return is not on a consistent basis. It's not an easy job.
No.
Right. So, and you really need to be doing something different.
Yeah.
In order to have an alpha, right? So, so that is something that I constantly remind myself.
Yeah.
Which of course means that you're constantly worrying, right? Because is this it, right? But I think it's good habit to have, thinking process wise, so that you don't become complacent.
One of the things, just to point this out, I don't know if you've been told this, I'm sure you have, but I think one of your skills is if there's a problem, you will bring it up and you're very transparent and direct, not in a rude way, but frank. And because what I've learned in business is a lot of people spend so much time beating around the bush, and actually in the end, it leads to two people drifting.
Yes.
Right. But one of the things that I've always admired about you is you'll call someone up on something. Have you been told that before? Is it something you've observed?
I feel that way.
Yeah.
Because I feel that actually, I mean, on that point, right? I feel that the periods in my career that I enjoy the most is where the decisions are made based on business decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And then everybody sort of speak their mind, and then we move ahead with the.
So it's not who's right, it's what's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's the most important. And, during the parts of my career where it's about, what the boss wants, that tends to be less enjoyable and, more importantly, less productive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, I don't think anyone has really sort of said that to me, but I mean, it's something that
I've noticed it working with you, because coming from the UK and actually just my background, it's people are either very direct or not at all. And I always say this anecdotally, but I feel it's true. It took me 7 years of living in Singapore when I learned yes is actually no.
Yeah.
And things have changed now.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And but like in Hong Kong, it's no.
Yeah.
They will, cut you down and chop you out and kick you out.
Yeah.
So I find it quite liberating. And I say to my guys when they're making sales calls, and if someone picks up and even if they're rude to them, I said, yeah, but that's actually a golden opportunity.
Yes.
Because at least they picked up. Otherwise, you don't know. It's an empty telephone.
Yes.
And how you react to that negativity, you could do a bit of Aikido on it and bring it around.
Agree.
Yeah.
I definitely bring it up onto the surface, right?
Yeah.
Makes it a lot easier.
A lot easier.
Yeah.
Whereas, talk to me about, because one thing I've always admired about you've always stayed very slim, fit, and healthy. Now, I don't know about you. Have you balanced with that and struggled with that balance? Or what do you do in terms of your health routine?
Okay. So I tried to. I mean, I used to run a lot more.
You did a lot of middle and long distance, right?
I used to do marathon. I would try to do one marathon a year.
Yeah.
Then after COVID, or actually during one of those training season, my knees started to protest, so I adjusted that a little bit. But I always feel that having active lifestyle where I try to exercise, either running or swimming or going to the gym, actually makes me more alert.
Yeah, it does, right?
Yeah, you feel more energized. So if you going back to your earlier question about having a habit, if it's a physical habit, I think I try to make sure that I make time for exercise.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I for example, I have this simple stationary bike that I bought during COVID.
Okay.
If I finish my day at 10 p.m., I will go home. I will make sure I hop on it, do 30 minutes on the bike just to bring my heart rate out, sweat myself a bit.
Yeah.
Then I'm done for the day. So I try to be consistent.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing as well. It doesn't mean that I have to hit the gym and have a 2-hour session.
Yeah.
It's really about doing a little bit every day.
Yeah.
So not too different from investing, right? You just need to make sure that you do the right thing bit by bit.
Very true.
Over time.
How else do you unwind? Because one of the things that I've realized as I've gotten older is stamina.
Yes.
And energy management, which is massively overlooked, because I see a lot of people crash in their careers.
Yep.
So how have you personally dealt with that?
So actually it's really a balance of exercising, and also I make sure that I get my sleep as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there'll be days I'll try to, especially the weekends, I'll try not to have an alarm.
Yeah.
Right? And then you just
go through,
see what your body needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point, by the way. Yeah. Really good point. Yeah. It's a luxury.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
but if you can do it,
yes,
a Saturday, Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I feel that again, the combination of punishing your body a little bit and then letting it rest, recover, I think that is important. Again, I mean, that's really something that I learned during my marathon training.
Yeah.
Because obviously you put your body through a lot.
Where did you do some of the marathons? Did you do them out of country?
I actually went to Osaka twice.
Nice. Which time of year is that?
They had it in December, early December.
Oh, so it's cool.
Cool, yeah.
Okay.
So my body works a lot better in cold weather.
Yeah.
So
isn't that too cold though?
10 to 15.
Okay.
It's not too bad.
Okay.
So because as you run after 2-3 hours, your body really heat up, right? And that's where you start to feel tired.
What about when the thing I didn't like about running in the cold was the cold air. coming in. It was something I personally struggled with it.
Okay, interesting.
And I actually ended up wearing like a scarf a little bit just in front of my
cover.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but everyone's different. Right?
Yeah, for me
didn't
it's
have that
okay.
problem.
Yeah, I didn't have that problem. Of course, when you start, your body is cold, right?
Yeah.
It is very cold. So you need an extra layer. Then as you run along, you get rid of the extra layer.
Yeah.
So that makes a difference. But for me, as my body warm up, having that cold weather really helped. So when I do the Stand Chart Marathon here,
Yeah.
it's a struggle. Yeah, struggle. Yeah.
You know what's interesting is though, because that is so much about mental fortitude and discipline. Apart from the physical is one thing.
Yes.
The amount of time that goes into things.
Yes.
But I think if you meet any other fellow runner, they have an appreciation for what just happened. I just saw the indoor world record for the mile was just set. And I don't know if you've ever run on an indoor track. So typically they're only 200-meter laps.
Yes.
And then you're actually going up and down. It's not that easy.
Yes.
And where I grew up, so my local track was the Roger Bannister Track Club. It was named after him, and he broke the 4-minute mile. And I've run a sub 4-minute mile.
Wow.
And but the funny thing is, like at that time, that was the barrier. Right.
Yes.
And after that, loads of people, broke the record.
Yes.
But what I realize is we're all built for different things. So for me, I'm an ex-sprinter. So when you talk about a marathon, I'm thinking, keys in the car, I'll drive it.
Yeah.
I don't want to run one.
Well, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, we're all different.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I was young, I hated running.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't have the patience. I mean, whatever running I did in school was up to 400 meters.
Okay.
It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Sprint and get it over with.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I'm more into sports. I play basketball, for example.
Okay.
But as I grew older, I realized that I have more patience for it, perhaps. But more importantly, it's become my me time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's time that you actually have your.
Do you listen to anything? Or...
When I first started running, I did that.
Yeah. And then you stopped.
Yes.
By the way, this is another type of discipline I was telling my wife about, because, okay, if I'm going for maybe a walk and I need to listen to something, because it's work, I'll listen to it. But actually, I think leaving everything off, that is really a gift.
Yes.
Because then allows you some time to think.
Yes.
Right? It's like a meditation.
Yes. To me, it's like a meditation. But of course, you need to be of a certain level where the physical aspect is not hindrance, right? Not hindrance, not affecting you.
Yes.
Then your legs can just keep going. I mean, of course, I'm talking about running at a more leisurely pace, right?
Yeah.
Then your brain can start to, develop and wander around, right?
But you see, I think it's a crutch because, so for example, we've all been there working out and you have your favorite music on, but if you take that away, right, everything changes. Like if you're doing push-ups on a slightly cushioned mat versus on a hard floor.
Yes.
So what I realized is we as we get older, we try and make things a little bit more comfortable. But I would suggest to anyone that uses music, try and do it without.
Yes.
And it takes your head to a new headspace altogether.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Who are some of your favorite athletes then? Just curious, growing up in whatever sports.
Okay. I used to play basketball.
Okay.
So I followed the Lakers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who were your favorite players then growing up?
Magic Johnson.
Okay.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yeah.
Of course, Michael Jordan. Subsequently, he was a bit younger.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I was looking at some of his supposed stats. I don't know. I mean, I never saw them. I never saw him doing them. But what he was able to lift and jump and run was pretty phenomenal when you consider how big he was.
Yes.
And then you look at that Bruce Lee movie, which is pretty, again, and he was in Conan. And in fact, it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger book that I read where he was talking about just how strong that fellow was.
Yes.
Which is because he doesn't look it.
Yes.
Because he's so tall and slim.
Yes.
But wiry.
Yeah. But it's agile. I mean, for a big guy, right?
Yeah.
Tall guy. Interesting. And that actually during that period, it was also where I start to appreciate about teamwork, right? Because you see how they play.
Yeah.
It's not about having a scoring machine.
Yeah.
But having players to complement each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that was really interesting.
That was big.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I always say to the guys that work with me is, like, who are some of the people that you idolize, or it can be in sports or in business, because you can take so much from them. You know, they've already been there and done it, and then you stand on the shoulders of great people.
Yep.
Right. And I think but it's something that, you know, as a former athlete and in business, what I've realized is if you diagnose and you dissect what it is that people do and do well,
Yes.
and try to build it into your game without changing the essence of you, it's a top up.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and also being an athlete or being in sports, right? Goes back to my earlier point about, you know, when you're in school, you a lot of things are actually concepts.
Yes.
But when you're in sports, it's about doing it.
Yes.
Right. So then you appreciate whether be it teamwork,
Yeah.
consistency. I mean, some of these concepts,
Yeah.
you could listen and then, oh yeah, it makes sense. But you know, you forget about it the moment you walk away, right?
Yeah.
But if you are doing it and then you see the difference between, you know, when I put it in the effort,
Yeah.
this happens. Otherwise, that happens. You learn, right? And then it sticks with you as well.
My daughter's just turned 16 and she loves basketball, and we've got an agreement when she's playing and there's like say 30 seconds on the shot clock, because she runs point, that I'll shout and let her know, just in case she's not aware of it or if someone's behind her.
Yep.
And you know, it takes a lot of courage when the clock's running down, and everyone's watching.
Yeah. You're holding the ball.
Yeah, but I'm always reminded by, you know, it's the same with Federer, and, you know, like he said, I think he only won 52% of his points.
Yes.
And then, you know, with Michael Jordan, he took the most shots, he scored the most, but he also missed the most because he took the most. Yeah. And again, that's there's something about that. What's one of the things that you're trying to do this year? You know, like, you know, as you continue on your investor role.
Yeah. So the fund has been 3 years now, since inception. So for me, I will continue to, in terms of a long-term basis, I'll continue to build the track record. So that's the sort of the marathon part of it. But this year, in terms of what I'm trying to do a little bit different, is to raise the profile, because, you know, going out to meet more people, talk more to more people about the fund.
Yeah.
Because we do have it's still a short track record, but at least there's a track record.
Yeah.
So that's the focus this year.
Do you think, because I always use this analogy, it's like if you've written and recorded the world's greatest love song, it's great, but unless it's played on the radio or on iTunes, no one's going to hear it, you're not going to make any money. Yeah. So at that point, you have to put your sales hat on, right, in terms of getting the message out there.
Yes.
How do you have to do it?
So, yeah, for me, I mean, what I enjoy doing is, obviously, I like to, when I meet people, I like to share what I do professionally, because, I mean, obviously, it's something that interests me a lot, and I believe in my strategy a lot as well, my investment strategy for my fund. So I like to share it. But the good thing for me is that I don't go into a meeting with an agenda, right, to get AUM, because in the short term, I don't really have a particular AUM target, right? And really that's the difference where I am compared to in the past. So it really boils down to me happily sharing my story, but for the listener, if they are not interested, it's perfectly okay, right? So there's no issue at all. So those are the kind of work, so to speak, that I enjoy doing. Yeah. But of course, you know, there are cases where, you know, people become interested, they want to find out more. I mean, that's great. But if not, then we'll just continue with the conversation. So this way of sort of approaching my marketing is the way that I enjoy. Because to me, the most important thing for my prospect or my clients is that they must find the strategy and the investment objective consistent with what they want to do, right? It's not about me trying to sell something, but it's about them finding out for themselves that this is what they want. Then we work together, because it is important, because this way they will meet their objectives, and more importantly for me, I will have the right type of clients that are investing in the strategy, the style that I'm investing.
Do you think, because you co-invest, that's a major sales point, right? Because you're all in.
Yes. I think that's of course a very strong point, because, you know, then my investors know that, you know, I'm a co-investor as well. I'm on the same boat, right? I might be the captain, but I'm on the same boat.
Yeah.
Rather
You're
than
in it.
Yeah, rather than I'm controlling remotely, right? So.
And then just to wrap up, Sean, and thank you so much for sharing, like as you continue this entrepreneurial journey, right, and running your own fund, I mean, that in itself, is it something that you thought you would be doing like 10, 15 years ago when we first met?
Yes, I think as I alluded to, as a sell side person, going to the buy side, because you've spent so much time looking at from the other side of the pond, right?
Yeah.
So it's always something that you wish you could do. So really, perhaps after a long journey, I'm doing that now. And I feel that my journey actually equipped me much, much better because I've been to the IB world.
Yes.
I see how IB investors invest, their emotions, the technicals, why they need to do certain things. I appreciate that a lot better. Then I move over to wealth management. I can appreciate why in ultra high net worth investors invest certain way, how private banks invest certain way, market at their ideas, much better understanding now. So I feel that through that long journey, I'm a much better investor.
Yeah.
Because end of the day is really the thing that doesn't change is the emotions.
Yes.
Right. Whether you're talking about investing in .com, investing in financial sector during the GFC, or AI today, is all about ultimately the businesses on one hand,
Yeah.
and on the other hand, the emotions.
Well, if you look at your career, how long were you at CS? Was it 13 or 15 years?
I was there for 11 years.
Was it 11 years?
Yeah.
My memory is, sorry, it's not what it was. And then you're almost a decade there. So your longevity in the roles that you've been in is big. And I think also, your value system, your integrity. So I think these are key. Sean, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers.